Cal. So I just wanted to do a quick accompaniment video to the blog post that I posted on Patreon about decolonization. I'd like to just chat about that a little bit, where I'm coming from, what decolonization means to me, and how it can help you, whether you come from an Indigenous background, the African diaspora, or if you have purely European familial history and you want to know about how others with less Western history, non-Western history, go about unraveling those parts of ourselves in our craft, okay? A little bit about my background. My mother's family is Mexican, primarily Indigenous, but there is, we're a mix. There's some Portuguese in there, maybe some Spanish, I don't really know. But we do come from, based on my research, we do come from somewhere back there, the Nahua people. And the Nahua people, the most famous tribe of which are the Aztecs, or the Mexica, were a group of tribes in the central Mexican basin who spoke the same language, Nahuatl, and worshipped generally the same pantheon of gods. So this is different than Mayan. Different cultures, different language, different gods. There's some overlap here and there, but essentially the cultures were quite different, even though they came from the same general region. That said, I do have some Mayan background as well on my mother's side. A little bit, it's unclear, because many of us come from colonization. We don't have a lot of records about our families. So for a lot of Mexican Americans, what that means is that Aztec is often a starting point for looking into our ancestry. Now there are lots of different tribes in Mexico, and Aztec is not even a real tribe. They call themselves the Mexica. That's where we get the name Mexican. It comes from Mexica in Mexico, by and large. So that said, I started off with learning about Aztec culture. I'll refer to it as Aztec just because that's the common term for this group of people. But the more research I did, the more I learned that while my family likely were not Mexica, they came from a similar tribe. So the deities that I work with are predominantly Aztec. Deities like Xolotl is one that I resonate with a lot. Tezcatlipoca and Tonantzin. And Xochiquetzal is another one that I've worked with. And I'll do another post or video about who those deities are, some of the mythology around Aztec culture, Mexican culture, and the greater Latin brujeria mythology and folklore. But for now, I just want to focus on my process of decolonizing. So that's my mother's family. On my father's side, as you can tell, I don't look Indigenous, and Hispanics are not all a monolith, but I know that if you were looking at me, you would not think, oh, she's Mexican. I've gotten Russian, I've gotten Polish, I've gotten French, which I don't get, but I've gotten a lot of things. Rarely have I gotten Mexican, but I am. Around my father's side, I am English, Dutch, German, general European medley of countries. And there's rich culture there as well. There's rich folklore and folk magic practices there as well. However, the older I've gotten, the less I have resonated with the spirituality of that part of my family, and I'll get into that later. My grandmother, when I was growing up, on my father's side, she's Wiccan, and so I was exposed to the idea of witchcraft as a real, tangible spiritual practice pretty young. And I was very interested in it. She showed me some of her rituals that she'd done, exposed me to spell working a little bit by telling me about some of the spells that she had done. And I got really into witchcraft. And in fact, when I was in summer camp, I got in trouble because I was going around telling everyone I was a witch, making potions, and trying to fly on a broomstick. Anyway, so I already knew what Yule was, Ostara, all of these Sabbats, Samhain, Beltane, etc. And so when I first decided to begin practicing witchcraft, when I started getting into tarot and all of this occult stuff, that was the first stepping point. It was that stuff, and it was the love and light spirituality that many of us are familiar with, the star seeds and the twin flames and the all that stuff. Now, I've delved into each of these things, but then in 2020, we know what happened. I felt increasingly fragmented in my identity. I felt like I didn't know where I belonged. And so my soul really felt a calling to delve into my Mexican ancestral practices, because it was something that I neglected for a long time. Yes, I grew up in a very Mexican family. We had a lot of Mexican cultural practices. My grandmother read tarot, which is not necessarily, it's not exclusively Mexican, but there's a lot of that going on in Mexican culture. There's a lot of ingrained folk magic practices. I grew up Catholic. I had a First Communion, all of that stuff. But I didn't resonate with Catholicism either. I called myself culturally Catholic for a long time because it was the only really real way I had to connect to my Mexican culture. So I felt called to really dig deep about what those practices are and how I can incorporate it in my life. So I researched a lot about the Aztec gods, about their practices of divination, and then about specifically Mexican American practices. I live in New York City, which is it's a city that's very Latin, shall we say. There are a lot of cultural pockets. Not as many Mexican. There's a lot of Puerto Rican people. There's a lot of Dominican people. There's people of all cultures. There's lots of Mexican people too. There's Guatemalan people. So I started visiting some botanicas, which are, if you're not familiar, they are Latin witchcraft shops, basically. So they carry a lot of the stuff that other metaphysical shops carry, but they're specifically Latin, so they cater to those practices. I learned how to do egg limpias. I learned the uses of Florida water, cascarilla, cascarilla. And so it has really been a long process, a process that's still ongoing. I'm constantly seeking out new information, learning new things, trying new things to see what works, what makes me feel connected. So what decolonization means to me is this. Colonization, among other things, is a process of fragmenting the self. What the colonizer wants is for us to not know who we are. Because if we don't know who we are, and if we don't know where we come from, we are easier to control. What the colonizer wants is to break us up into pieces. That's why we, and I'm speaking as collective Latine community, but this goes for anyone in marginalized communities, in colonized communities. We constantly have to justify our existence as Americans, as Mexicans in my case. I mean, how many of us have said, well, I'm this percentage of Mexican, this percentage of Taino, whatever, wherever you come from, you know the percentage, don't you? Because you've used it as an argument towards people who want to tell you that you're not who you know that you are. We all feel like imposters in some way. That's the colonizer within us. That's the colonizer speaking through us. So my decolonization, what that means to me, is a process of self-actualization. It's a process of self-identification. We deserve to not be fragmented. We deserve to be whole within ourselves. We deserve to feel whole. We deserve to not feel like we're imposters for connecting to our cultural practices that are our birthright. So, wherever your family comes from, whatever percentage you are of that cultural makeup, of that ethnic makeup, I urge you to see yourself as a bridge between what you are and what they think you are. Learn to inhabit the space between and question why. Why do you feel scared to speak Spanish to your family? Why do you feel like an imposter? Both in Western white spaces and in non-white spaces. The act of affirming who you are, of saying, for me, I'm a Mexican American Bruja. That's more powerful than anything. Because there is witchcraft in words. And the space between is ours. We inhabit the liminal space as hyphenated Americans. Learn to use that to your advantage. Because the liminal space is the spirit world. I hope that resonates with others. I know I'm not alone in feeling like it's been a struggle to find where I belong. And again, you know, I approach this as a Mexican American woman, but I hope it resonates with other hyphenated identities too. Witchcraft is and always has been an act of rebellion. It is a means of claiming power for the communities that are not in power, against the powers that be. And so when we talk about things like the Sabbats, the love and light spirituality, the homogenization of witchcraft in the spiritual community, Wicca. It's great if it resonates with you. But if it doesn't, you may need to decolonize your craft. I have a reading list that I'm going to be posting for those who want to delve more into this and what it means for their practice. There's a lot of really, really insightful, really intelligent people who've been thinking about these concepts for a very, very long time. So if you are interested, I urge you to take a look at those resources and use them. As always, if you resonate with my work, if you resonate with me as a reader, as a creator, as a practitioner, please follow me. Thank you so much for your support. It is with that support that I'm able to really follow my calling as far as it goes. So, thank you again, and bye.